Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church, recently made the statement that all religions are a pathway to God. Does this mean that for thousands of years Christians have actually been incorrect? And have we been unnecessarily harsh towards other religions? Stay tuned, I've got these answers coming for you next. Well, hey everyone, thank you for checking out this episode of the Chad Blackman Podcast. My name's Chad. This whole channel is about helping you to know, love, and defend the Word. Today I want to address what the Catholic Pope said. My hope with this video isn't to bash Catholics or be unnecessarily harsh with them. There's actually a lot of very serious devout Catholics who are raising the red flag on the Pope's statement here. They're calling foul on what he has said. Partly because the Catholic Catechism itself specifies that Christianity and salvation is only through the mediation of Christ. Specifically, the Catholic Catechism says all salvation comes through Christ, the head, through the church, which is his body. So my heart in doing this isn't to bash them or to bash Catholicism as a whole. It's rather to address an objection that is very powerful against Christianity. That objection is that Christianity is too exclusive. It makes exclusive truth claims that are not very palatable, especially to the modern Western mind. What I mean by this is that Christianity makes the statement, there is only one mediator between man and God, and that is Jesus. There is only one name under heaven by which men are saved, and that is Jesus. So Christianity makes these very exclusive claims. There's one way to God. There's one way to be reconciled back to the Father. There's one way that we are saved, and it is through Christ. That, by definition, means Islam is incorrect, Judaism is incorrect, that means Hinduism is incorrect, Buddhism is incorrect, Zoroastrianism is incorrect, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses. It means all of these other religions are incorrect, and that's very hard for the modern mind to grasp. We don't really like that. We want to be loving and inclusive, and we want to have this kind of utopian society where everybody's right and everybody gets along perfectly. And what happens is they'll start to paint Christianity in this way where you're causing division, Christians, with your exclusive claims. You're saying that by definition, all these other people are going to hell. That's very hateful. We simply can't believe in a religion that is that intolerant or that exclusive. And what happens is this can be a really powerful emotional argument. It really pulls on the heartstrings. We want to be inclusive. We all want to be loving. And then there's also the intellectual problem. Well, yeah, how could a loving God send all these people to hell? How could a good God who said that he loves the world, why would he even create all these people if they're just destined for damnation? And so it does create like a really powerful 1-2 punch of pulling on the heart and also pulling on the mind. And I want to try to address it because I think what we're seeing in the Pope's statement is indicative of what's happening in a lot of the hearts and minds of people in the church. So let's address this problem here and try and answer it. What the Pope is talking about here is oftentimes referred to as pluralism or universalism. Sometimes you'll even hear Unitarian Universalism. It's just the idea that all religions are getting you towards God. And the common parable that's used to describe this worldview is the parable of the blind men and the elephant. You've got this huge elephant with a bunch of blind men all groping at the elephant. And one man says elephants are like snakes because he's grabbing, the tail of the elephant. And another guy says, no, elephants are much more like tree trunks because he's grabbing the leg of the elephant. And then you've got another guy who grabs the ear of the elephant, and he says, no, elephants are much more like sails of a ship. And on and on and on, right? They're all grasping different parts of the elephant, but nobody's seeing the entire elephant. So the parable here is that all religions are like that. All religions have a little piece of the divine, but no one has the whole divine in their worldview, in their religion. It's all little fragments, and everyone's got a little bit of the truth, but nobody's getting you all the way there. Now, that sounds clever. That sounds kind of paints a cool visual picture in your mind, and it allows you that emotional escape hatch where you can say, yeah, see, everybody's got a piece of the truth. We can all just get along. We can all just coexist together. What happens is, when you start to examine this closer, you'll find that this whole pluralistic view breaks down. On the surface, it looks very, very appealing. On the surface, it feels like this is very warm, we can all coexist, this is very happy. But as you start to dig into it, you'll see that it doesn't hold up under scrutiny. And scrutiny. How about that? Scrutiny. And it actually starts to lead you into some pretty bad lies. Let's take this parable for example. This parable is supposed to show all religions have a piece of the truth. What's baked into the parable that nobody ever points out is the fact that there is an observer who's further back and higher up and can actually see what's really happening. So the parable is supposed to say all religions get you a piece of the truth, but the only way the parable works is that there is someone further back who sees the full picture, who does have a full grasp of the truth. And so you'll see that this parable doesn't actually support the very point it's trying to make. This parable doesn't get you where you need to go, because the only way it works is there is somebody right there that sees the full truth. And here's what you'll see as you start to examine different religions. Different religions aren't teaching different shades of the same truth. It's not like Christianity paints in light blue and Islam paints in a little bit of a darker shade of blue, and Hinduism is more like a sky blue. And it's all kind of similar, but it's just different little flavors or takes. Pluralism would have much more persuasiveness if that was the case. What you see when you start to examine different religions is that they are teaching diametrically opposed ideas. I mean, they're not close, similar ideas that maybe we could fuse together. It's like they're teaching fundamentally opposite ideas. Take a lot of the Eastern religions that purport there's millions of gods. The monotheistic religions teach, no, there is only one God. Those are diametrically opposed ideas. They can't both be true. They're too far apart to coexist together. Even as we start to get within the monotheistic religions, what Christianity says about Jesus is very different than what Islam says about Jesus. They can't both be true. Christianity purports that he is Lord, he is the divine, he is God who has taken on human flesh. Well, Islam's going to say he's just a good prophet. Now, that's nice of them to say that, but those two pictures are very different. Even within what we would call technical Christianity would call Mormonism a cult. It would call it a spin-off of Christianity, not actual Christianity. But a lot of times popular classifications of Christianity will put Mormons under the banner of Christianity. I mean, if you just look at what Mormonism teaches about Jesus, it's wildly different than what Orthodox Christianity teaches. So we can't have these things both be true because they're just too far apart. This is a basic idea of logic. It's the law of non-contradiction. A cannot equal B and also C. It just can't do that. It can't be true simultaneously that there are a plurality of gods and also one God. That's a law that breaks the law of non-contradiction. It cannot be true that Jesus is second person of the Trinity, Lord Almighty, Savior, and he's just a good prophet. Those two violate each other. One is true, and the other one, by definition, has to be false. And so what you'll see as you start to really examine pluralism here, this parable that all religions are grasping at pieces of the truth, that parable only works if somebody's further back and can see the full picture. You start to really examine different religions, you'll see that they're saying things that are diametrically opposed to each other. One of them has to be true. One of them has to have that further back, higher up grasp on reality. What that does to us is then it brings up the question, well, which religion then has that higher up, further back grasp on what reality is, explains the human condition best, explains our future, our meaning, our origin? What worldview is that? And for me, the evidence for Christianity was the most persuasive. Now, this brings up another question that a lot of people have. A lot of people will say, well, you're only a Christian because you grew up in the United States of America that's predominantly Christian. You had parents that were Christian. Dad grew up Catholic. Mom grew up Protestant. Like you were in this Christian environment, and that's the only reason why you became a Christian. Here's the problem with that argument. Technically, it's called the genetic fallacy. You can't destroy an argument by just pointing out where its origin came from. And the other problem is that this argument cuts both ways. I could just as easily say you're only an atheist because you grew up in such and such environment. You grew up in a highly educated atheistic city. You are an atheist because of the environment you grew up in. It doesn't get us any closer to actually answering the question. What we need to do is look at the evidence. And for me, one of the most powerful, persuasive aspects of Christianity, separating itself from the rest of the pack, is the resurrection of Christ. The resurrection of Jesus separates itself from all kinds of other religions. Now, I already know what some of you are probably thinking. Some of you are like, I don't know, Chad, I saw that movie Zeitgeist, or I had a religion professor in college say that the resurrection was actually ripped off from all of these other resurrection myths. It's true. There are a lot of other resurrection myths that are out in the pantheon of religions. All I would encourage you to do is simply look at the nature and style of all those religious resurrection accounts and then compare them to the nature and style of Christ's resurrection. And you will find that they're wildly different. The resurrection accounts of these gods like Osiris or the Bodhidharma in Buddhism or Ishtar from Mesopotamian religions. But what you'll see is that all of those resurrection accounts are wildly different. They're so clearly mythological. The style and the writing of those resurrection accounts, you have these half animal, half human resurrection accounts. A lot of times these resurrection accounts correspond to the agricultural seasons throughout the year. So you have spring, life coming up out of the ground, fall, and into winter it dies and goes back into the ground. These resurrection tales of gods just correspond to the agricultural cycle of the land. That's very different than Christianity saying this guy was publicly executed, buried in a tomb that we all knew where he was. He was buried in a famous person's tomb, Joseph of Arimathea. The tomb was verifiably empty. It was verifiably empty because the enemies of Christianity had to come up with a counter story. Their counter story was the disciples stole his body away. Now, the reason why that counter story is so important is because the body clearly was gone. The body was not there. They could not say, just go to the tomb and look, it's gone. You're having to deal with some pretty different resurrection accounts here. After Christ rises from the dead, the disciples claim he showed himself to all of them, to over 500 people. You won't have any kind of eyewitness attestation like Christ's resurrection in all of the other resurrection accounts of the world. This is a quintessential miracle. Paul even says this in Corinthians. He says, if the resurrection didn't happen, we're still dead in our sins, we're still trapped. In fact, we're to be pitied more than anybody else because we're believing in this great myth. However, if the resurrection did happen, then that points us in the direction that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, who claimed to be God, who claimed to have the power to forgive sins, it shows that those wild claims were vindicated. Those wild claims were backed up. Because anybody can claim to be God. Anybody can claim to forgive sins, but then to predict that he'll die on a cross, be resurrected 3 days later, that shows he wasn't just lying. He wasn't just making it up. This for me is a very, very powerful argument. And to all of you out there watching, unsure which religion is the right one, maybe you're attracted to this idea that multiple religions can be true, they're all getting us towards God. I would challenge you to really look at the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. There are two great scholars done a lot of work on this. Dr. Gary Habermas and Dr. N.T. Wright have done some really high-level scholarship on evidence for the resurrection of Christ. It's far more sound and meaty than just believe the resurrection because the Bible says so. There are some pretty compelling arguments that this really did happen. That for me was probably the first domino to tip, one of the first dominoes to tip, I should say. When I started to see this resurrection account's very different than all of the others, no other God has been able to come back from the dead and show himself to hundreds and hundreds of people. No other religion has transcended the cultural, geographical, linguistic boundaries like Christianity has. That's a powerful piece of evidence to me. And probably the most powerful piece of evidence, and it's very personal and subjective, but it's just been my own direct experience of the Lord. My own direct experience of the forgiveness, the grace, the peace that comes from Christ is a powerful testimony to myself. For years, I was trapped in this cycle of shame and guilt and condemnation. What broke that cycle of shame and guilt was the gospel of Christ. This unbelievable news that we could be saved by grace, not by our own effort, not by our own works, but saved by this miraculous gift of God, that he would bestow onto us through faith the identity of son, of daughter, that we would be, according to Colossians 1, holy, blameless, and above reproach. Not because we actually are, but because by Christ's work on the cross, he has made us holy, blameless, and above reproach. And this gets me to probably my final point that I'll end with here. For me, one of the most defining differences of Christianity from every other religion is this idea of grace. It's been rumored that C.S. Lewis, when he was at Oxford, was walking throughout the halls and stumbled into a classroom where there was a whole group of religious scholars, and they were writing out all of these different facts and theological ideas presented in world religions. And they challenged Lewis, knowing that he was a Christian. They said, "What makes your religion different from all of these other religions?" Lewis went up to the chalkboard. This is rumored. He went up there and he just wrote one word. He said, grace. Grace is what separates Christianity from every other religion. Every other religion is going to say you have to do X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C in order 1, 2, and 3. You've got to do all of these things to please your single God or your pantheon of gods. That's kind of the formula for every single human religion. Christianity is wildly different, very, very different. Christianity says you will never be morally excellent enough to please God. You will never be righteous enough. Your best righteousness is infinitely short of achieving salvation. Rather, God has come to chase after you because he loves you. God has come to pay your penalty of sin on the cross and to pay it in full. Not pay it 50%, but then you've got to come up with the next 50% with your good actions. It isn't like a quid pro quo where I'll do this for you, but then you have to do this for me. That's not how it works. We are perfectly, forever, freely, fully saved by faith in the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. All of our sin wiped clean, even when we don't deserve it, especially when we don't deserve it. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I mean, this is this is hard to get your mind wrapped around. In fact, this is probably one of the things that I still struggle with the most. I still really struggle with believing God actually loves me, believing God actually could save me. And this is spectacular news about Christianity. I can so easily get trapped in the cycle of I've got to be good enough for him, I've got to earn it, I've got to merit it, and that's a horribly deadly trap because I can't be good enough. I can't ever do well enough, which means I always feel like God is upset with me. The antidote to that is the gospel. The antidote is Jesus, you have given me an identity of perfectly holy, perfectly blameless, above any kind of condemnation. There's no one who can bring a charge against God's elect because Christ is the judge and the justifier. So this to me is a really powerful evidence. What do you do with that? That's diametrically opposed to all the other religions. They'll all say you've got to earn it. Here goes Christianity saying you'll never earn it. Jesus earned it for you. He vicariously took your penalty to the cross, and he now through faith can clothe you in his righteousness. That's wildly different. And it goes even further. This could be a whole nother video, but it goes even further because Christianity then says he'll send the Spirit into our hearts to change our soul, to like rewire our desires from the inside out. I just don't see that in any other religion. So to me, it's pretty clear there can't be all religions being true. It just doesn't work like that. It has to be one is right, and by definition, the others are incorrect. The real question is which one is true? For me, I am persuaded by the evidence through Christ's resurrection and through the doctrine of grace. Christianity is very distinct. You have to at least admit there's something very different about it. And I think it demands your attention to go, how did this resurrection story permeate the entire globe? Why is it that Christianity's had such reach over the last 2,000 years? And why is this concept of grace so different than anything else we see in the world religions? So I hope that gives you some rails to run on. I hope that gives you a couple of things to think about. Pluralism sounds really good. On the surface, it looks really nice and kind, but it can actually lead to some pretty bad mistakes. So hopefully this helps you, and I thank you for watching. Thank you for checking this out. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, God bless.